Now let's look at the future of online writing. Hopefully, this might spark some ideas for your final paper. Our final assignment is due no later than December 11. Please email me your paper electronically to nickleshy@aol.com. If you want me to return the paper to you so you can see my handwritten notes and comments, please include a mailing address, and I'll do my best to mail them to you as soon as possible. Here are the details for the final assignment. It should be at least 5 full pages, the usual format for a college paper, double-spaced, 12-point font size, Times New Roman, or some similar font, 1-inch margins. You can go slightly over 5 pages, but don't go under. The first half of the paper, about 2.5 pages, write about your experience blogging. What have you learned? What did you most enjoy about it? What was challenging about it? How has your blog changed since you started? Will you continue blogging? Be as concise and specific as possible. For the second half, share your thoughts on the future of online writing. How do you think it will evolve? Your focus can be as narrow or specific as you wish. I'll leave it up to you. Some possible topics include the future of journalism, the future of literacy, the future of communication in general, or how online writing will be impacted by the developments in education, technology, social relationships, entertainment, politics. You can choose whatever you wish to emphasize. Remember, you can only have a few pages, so make your writing strong and tight. If you have any questions, please let me know. We can speculate a bit on the future by looking at history and looking at our present time and trying to see what trends exist. Will those trends be repeated or lead to something else? That's how we make educated guesses. Online media's first iteration has been called Web 1.0. It was a read-only web, as World Wide Web inventor Timothy Berners-Lee calls it, even though it had many interactive features such as message boards, chat rooms, email, instant messaging, and so on, because it still retains some of the broadcast traits of traditional media. It took a while for people to realize what they had and what a revolutionary change it really was. Websites were often static, and companies used domain names as an online stake, similar to their brick-and-mortar spaces in the physical world. Many made the mistake of just broadcasting their messages instead of realizing the interactive power of new media. Most recently, we've been in the Web 2.0 era of online media. This has been called the read-write web, dominated by user-generated content such as interactive blogs, audio and video file sharing, more dynamic web design, and so on. Everyone can interact with each other and contribute content. Online shopping sites and professional media sites allow for commenting, sharing, and more engagement. Now we are entering into what some are calling Web 3.0. It's the real-time web made possible by mobile technology, the explosion of social media, and the availability of enormous amounts of personal data, allowing instantaneous text and video chatting over extensive social networking platforms, as well as targeted information for one-on-one communication and transactions. Instant streaming video and audio, real-time status updates, in-the-moment commentary and feedback via Twitter and other microblogs, viral sharing on a mass scale to desired audiences, continuously updated syndication feeds. All of this is shifting the media environment into something that is becoming an ever-present part of our lives, for good and or bad, as opposed to the past versions when we would log in for specifically timed sessions. In this next phase, we are always plugged in. So what do you think will be next? When we talk about online writing, we usually think about the posts and comments that people write deliberately. But user-generated content is more than blog posts, images, and videos. There is also implicit participation. In Web 3.0 and beyond, we might be sharing information without even realizing it. The most valuable information may be that which is implied rather than deliberately posted. Implicitly contributed information is data that can be mined for information that is more valuable than the individual contributions. How many of you use Amazon, iTunes, Google, Facebook, Netflix? All of those companies gather information about you based on your implied online habits, not just what you explicitly share. Companies mine data you barely consider that you've contributed. Using this data is called harnessing collective intelligence. In years to come, presumably the recommendations and understandings of what is valuable will be far more nuanced and sophisticated than they are today. Sometimes it's easy to forget all the footprints we leave behind when we share data every time we use our credit cards, or EasyPass, or surf the web, or make an online purchase, or check in at a restaurant or a club using Foursquare or some other social network. How will this change in the future? New media are allowing for more personalization and customization through search engines, online commerce, social networking, news feeds, and more. Citizens are giving up a lot of privacy for these services. Will this continue? Will there be a backlash? There are benefits to sharing our information. The customization that you get in return for the lost privacy can be extremely useful. Easier and quicker web searches, more accurate and useful product and service recommendations, more targeted news filters, just to name a few. Your computer remembers your history, and you receive more targeted stories and news that you want to read that match your interests. But of course, there are also many perils and dangers. In terms of privacy, democracy, and communication, blogging and social networking sites are changing our culture. While we live in democracies, are not in opposition to the government, and abide by the loss of privacy doesn't seem to matter to many of us. But it matters greatly in less democratic countries, where there is a dangerous potential for increased surveillance and control. And we are starting to learn that even here, sharing too much information can lead to instances of identity theft, stalking, embarrassment, conflicts of interest at work, and so on. Retberg writes, acts of technologically assisted oppression were possible well before the internet, Google, or blogging. Blogs, knives, and most other technologies can be used for good and for evil. If we're aware of how to use them and of how they are being used, we can help to shape the future. You can see her argument throughout history before the rise in popularity of online media. You can see it in Nazi Germany. You can see it in the Cold War between the USSR and the United States. You hear the argument now that guns don't kill people, people kill people. But a gun is a tool that facilitates killing. Yet killers can find other tools even if guns are banned. So thinking of both sides of that argument, how do you think online writing will change in the future? Will stalking and bullying and online scams become more prevalent? Or will we find a way to combat them? Will technology be to blame? If so, how will it change? Will our online writing habits stay the same, revert back to the print model, or become something different entirely? Earlier this semester, we looked at the history of writing. Now, we can see how our electronic writing tools have also evolved, from desktop computers to laptops, to netbooks, to tablets, to even smaller mobile devices. What do you think is in store for the future? Journalists and publishers and content providers are aware that more and more people are online, and those professionals are struggling to transition their business models. We are seeing the conflict between free culture and revenue ideas such as advertising, paywalls, premium subscriptions, sponsorships, and other methods to raise money to support those businesses. Is there a solution in sight? If so, what do you think it will be? Retberg asks the big question. Will we still be blogging in 20 years' time? What about in 50 years' time, or 100? Beyond blogging, what kind of online writing will exist in the future? Retberg thinks that some sort of online writing will continue to exist. She writes that people like participating in the media. We like contributing and sharing our ideas, and we're unlikely to stop now that we have the technology to allow it. We have the tools that make it easy. How might those tools change? Might it become even easier? Quality, on the other hand, is not always so easy. For example, we now have such easy-to-use digital cameras, many built right into our handheld mobile devices. Yet that doesn't make everyone a great photographer. They still need training and experience and a good photographer's eye or videographer's instincts. The same is true for writing. Retberg continues her positive outlook. Participatory media that makes publishing available to everyone is like fire. Once the cunning Prometheus had stolen the secret of fire from Zeus and given it to us mortals, there was no way for the gods to take it back. We are seeing so many people rising up around the world to make their voices heard among the masses. Will this continue? Retberg says that with technology getting cheaper and easier to use, we're likely to continue to see shared media of all kinds: text, audio, still images and videos, and in more parts of the world between more groups of people. Do you agree? There definitely has been a global impact from online writing. What do you think the future holds? Retberg speculates that blogging may not remain a separate activity or genre as it is today. In the last few years, we've seen blogging spread into social network sites, and in some cases, merge with them. What do you think the future will be for the blogosphere and the social media landscape? How will blogs continue to evolve as more people engage in social networking? How will social networking change, and what will the impact be for online writing? Retberg thinks that perhaps blogs, Facebook, YouTube, and their ilk will simply take over and become the dominant media. It certainly seems as if that's the growing trend as traditional media continue to grow their presence online. Will it keep going in that direction? What will be the differences, if any, between blogs and traditional mass media news websites? Let your imagination run wild. In the book Say Anything: How Blogging Began, What It's Becoming, and Why It Matters, Scott Rosenberg points out that every group of bloggers progresses through its own natural life cycle: childish excitement, teenage angst, midlife crisis, elderly fatigue. Does this mean that we'll eventually see the death of blogging? If so, how soon? In what manner? What will replace it? If not, why not? You can look at the history of media technology for clues. Historically, the succession of media forms and technologies follows a predictable pattern. Every innovation arrives with a fanfare announcing that it will replace its predecessor. But when the dust settles, the newcomer almost always winds up having redefined that predecessor rather than eliminated it. Television did not kill radio or movies, for example. Online media might not fully kill print, but when the dust settles, what will remain? So how might this change online writing in the future? As people have flocked to Facebook and Twitter, they will not stop posting to or reading blogs, but their patterns of blogging will change. The social networks turn out to be an easier and more efficient channel for casual messages intended for a handful of friends. As a result, some unquantifiable portion of the world's blogging has already started to change, to become a little more deliberate, a little less telephonic in nature. Just like the internet made getting news easier and more efficient, just like TiVo and other DVRs made watching television more convenient for time-straggled viewers, so too social media are making it easier for people to text and update their current status to engage in real-time conversations. Even with the simplification of video and audio tools, there is still a need for written communication. Will that continue? Will it evolve? Rosenberg believes that blogging will survive. He writes that there is scant sign of mass abandonment of blogging. There's likely to be a long future in which a great number of people who wish to communicate online find the unique characteristics of a blog irresistible. We've seen the progression of online writing from news groups and message boards to personal websites, blogs, and social networks. So what's next? Will Moore's Law continue? Moore's Law, named after Intel co-founder Gordon E. Moore, describes a long-term trend in the history of computing hardware. The number of transistors that can be placed inexpensively on an integrated circuit doubles approximately every 2 years. This trend has continued for more than a half-century and is expected to continue until 2015 or 2020 or later, based on our current technology. Will there be some innovation to make the growth limitless? Or is there a wall we will eventually hit? Will we hit information overload if we haven't already? The prospect of an exponential growth in the sharing of lives through new media was a discouraging new twist on the by now familiar problem of information overload. How could anyone possibly read more posts, view more photos, watch more videos, follow more friends? Might the web face a crisis, a kind of die-off in sharing, where the oversupply of personal media caused people to quail and stop paying attention, removing any incentive to share in the first place? Personal information and ideas, from passive to participatory, has been addictive, but we are already seeing some backlash. Will overload make us passive again? Some people are already beginning to disconnect from the grid. Will this continue, or will there be better management of all that information? To answer that, we can look at other overload crises in history, and there have been some big ones. Working forward from a historical baseline of the Renaissance and a sort of Big Bang with the Gutenberg press, we find our species experiencing an expanding universe of information as a consistent condition of its existence. Within our lifetimes, each new technical transformation of the media landscape has inspired its own diagnosis of an overload crisis. Suddenly, the world had to deal with an overload of printed material, an overload of electronic media with thousands of channels, then countless amounts of information at our fingertips via the internet, then anywhere we went via mobile devices, then an explosion of social networks, and so on. We survived each one and managed to adapt. What's next? What upcoming media might replace the internet, if anything? The numbers show pretty consistently that much of the time Americans are spending blogging and posting comments and photos and videos is time taken away from watching television, not from reading books, print or now electronic, or otherwise enlightening ourselves. At the very worst, then, we're trading in one species of mind rot for another. We're all still reading, but online or on electronic devices. Television is evolving, bigger screens, higher definition, 3D, internet ready, but also available on small portable devices, tablets, and smartphones. Television programs are adding content online, Hulu, Sprint TV, Amazon Prime, and so on. Again, we can ask, what's next? What might the future hold? Rosenberg says that most likely this shift in attention and energy from broadcast to the web represents a real change in behavior. a renaissance in personal literacy and social participation that sustains the democratic promise the web's pioneers first envisioned. Do you agree? What do you think the future of literacy will be? For all the novelty surrounding it, the act of blogging is fundamentally literary. Will this continue? Changes in writing style brought on by new media, non-linear hyperlinks, abbreviated shorthand, email, chat rooms, instant messages, text messages, short status updates, Twitter, and so on, are they a harbinger of things to come? Most of us are intensely aware of the fragility of digital media. If not, a power outage will quickly remind us. A life's savings of information can vanish with the theft of a laptop or the crash of an unbacked up hard disk. But all information is fragile to some extent, is it not? Paper fades, bits get deleted, libraries burn, disks crash. Whatever the medium, permanence is out of reach. Changes in technology to read that data are another example of how fragile this digital information really is. 8-track tapes, cassette tapes, VHS tapes, floppy disks, CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays. It's like interpreting hieroglyphics. How will future generations read and access our online content? Arianna Huffington writes in her anthology book, The Huffington Post Complete Guide to Blogging, that blogs are hastening changes in the media landscape with their informality, immediacy, and openness to all comers, and old-timers in musty newsrooms have been following suit. We've seen new media's impact on journalism. What's next? Maybe for your final paper, you might want to focus on the future of journalism. The traditional media models are changing to adapt to new technology and new habits. What's emerging now is a fascinating hybrid of old-style news and blogging. Imagine Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, reporters with the Washington Post, who helped uncover the Watergate scandal that forced President Richard Nixon to resign, illustrated here as actors Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, who played them in the movie All the President's Men, based on the best-selling book. What would they have done differently if their heyday was now, with all the online media tools available? Would their secret contact, Deep Throat, have been someone they chatted with online? Would they have shared their scoops with the world via Twitter, or maybe they would have had their own blogs? How will journalism continue to change? What's the future of print publishing? Plenty of us would mourn the total loss of the traditional newspaper form, but as more people have handheld devices for reading headlines, and as more people read the headlines on desktop or laptop or tablet computers, the rationale for massacring trees to produce a print edition seems less and less clear. Paper, ink, printing machines, and delivery costs are expensive. Without them, the newspaper industry would be a lot more profitable. And as more and more stories break online, the traditions of print and broadcast media will have to change. Electronic publishing, e-readers, self-publishing are all current trends. Will they continue? What do you think the next phase will be? Rebecca Blood wrote in her pioneering book, The Weblog Handbook, Practical Advice on Creating and Maintaining Your Blog, that critics complain that weblogs aren't real writing. Detractors complain about incestuous linking, but webloggers emphasize the ability of grassroots networks to organize and amplify individual voices on the web. Are we trapping ourselves into a false worldview presented by the blogosphere and social networks? By clustering too closely together, bloggers risk amplifying their own view of the world to an extent that distorts their perception of reality. But there are benefits to the blogosphere. There is obvious value in conversing with others of like mind. Supportive communities reinforce and strengthen common values and provide a base of action for individual members. And of course, there are dangers. The danger arises when ideological weblogs cluster so tightly that they entertain no other views, like conservative radio rejecting the New York Times, or liberal 24-hour news channels rejecting Fox News. This isn't specific to online writing, but it's a trend that might lead us to speculate about where we're heading. Rebecca Blood is optimistic. She writes, "I would like to see more blogs that use their unique capabilities to illuminate the news, not just promote a familiar point of view. I would like to see a wave of truth seekers who ask hard questions and sort through available perspectives in an attempt to synthesize a truer, more accurate version of the facts than we can rely on from any one source. I would like to see more bloggers seek out opposing viewpoints in order to genuinely consider the different ways in which thoughtful people regard the world. Will this happen? What do you think?" If you're looking for some more reading material to help you with your thoughts on the future of online media, here are a few. First, I Live in the Future, and Here's How It Works: Why Your World, Work, and Brain Are Being Creatively Disrupted, by Nick Bilton. It's a provocative look at how new media models are shaping the future of cross-platform storytelling, an optimistic blueprint for where our digital universe is going. Second, The Shallows: What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, by Nicholas Carr. This is a more pessimistic look at what's happening and what might be in store as we depend so much on new media and online content. Here's a brief excerpt of what Carr has to say. "My mind isn't going so far as I can tell, but it's changing. I'm not thinking the way I used to think. I feel it most strongly when I'm reading. I used to find it easy to immerse myself in a book or lengthy article. Now my concentration starts to drift after a page or two. I get fidgety, lose the thread, begin looking for something else to do. I feel like I'm always dragging my wayward brain back to the text. The deep reading that used to come naturally has become a struggle." Third, Hamlet's Blackberry: A Practical Philosophy for Building a Good Life in the Digital Age, by William Powers. This book shows you how to avoid those digital and social pitfalls. It's a toolkit of refreshing remedies for our chronically multitasking, digitally distracted selves, collected from historical figures that lived long before the digital age. It's a good model to show how we can speculate based on what we've learned from history. The book blends the advantages of constant connectivity with the caution we need to exercise as we engage with the world in these new ways, extending an invitation to subvert our media routines in a way that prioritizes happiness over blind efficiency. Fourth, Too Much to Know: Managing Scholarly Information Before the Modern Age, by Ann Blair. It explores the history of contemporary media concerns like the impact of the Internet on publishing, information overload, and remix culture, tracing their roots to uncannily similar practices and concepts from the Renaissance and the Middle Ages. All these challenges we face might seem new, but you'd be surprised at how similar some of the information overload crises of the past were to what we're experiencing now. What can we learn from that? Fifth, Marshall McLuhan: You Know Nothing of My Work, by Douglas Copeland. This is full of insights on the evolution of media that presage many of our modern concerns. It offers a fascinating lens not only on the technological revolution of the past century, but also on the complex shifts in social cognition that it continues to beget. Sixth, Is the Internet Changing the Way You Think? The Net's Impact on Our Minds and Future, edited by John Brockman. It's a fantastic compendium by iconic contemporary thinkers like Chris Anderson, Esther Dyson, Howard Gardner, Kevin Kelly, and Brian Eno. Finally, Cognitive Surplus, Creativity and Generosity in a Connected Age by Clay Shirky. Here's a fascinating look at how new media and technology are transforming us from consumers to collaborators, harnessing the vast amounts of free-floating human potential to build on humanity's treasure trove of knowledge and bring about social change. So there you have some ideas on the future of online writing. For your final paper, pick something, either what we discussed or something else, and imagine what the future might hold for blogging, online journalism, literacy, communication in general. You decide. Be focused, be concise, and write it well. I look forward to reading your ideas. See you next time.